Welcome to this brief overview on the realities of migration from Central America. In this series, we will focus beyond issues at the United States border on realities faced by Central Americans that inform or force their decision to migrate. My name is Tom Hare, and I'm a senior researcher in the Central America Research Alliance at the Pulte Institute for Global Development, and I will be your moderator for this series. First, it is important to know the exact geography we will focus on. While Central America comprises a region that stretches from Mexico to Colombia and connects North and South America, our focus in this series is on the countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras in northern Central America, as these countries have been the source of most undocumented migration from Central America over the past few decades. It is worth noting, however, that while we will focus on these three countries, lately there has also been an increase in Mexican, Haitian, Venezuelan, Nicaraguan, and other arrivals at the US border, driven by political, climate, and economic challenges in their respective countries. Now, a little more about the current context in Central America. I think one of the best summaries of the realities in the region comes from my friend Eduardo Nunez Vargas of the National Democratic Institute. He identifies the many ways the region is in a prolonged period of transition. This period of transition is marked first by the peace accords from the end of the 20th century in Guatemala and El Salvador in particular, that were important to end conflicts in these countries. However, the transition from war to peace did not include the most marginalized or many new political or social actors in these countries. The inter-elite agreements and dealings, and a sense that states and governments are not for or at the service of their citizens, has not improved in the region in the past few decades. This period of transition is also comprised of a democratic transition in all three countries. And those transitions to democracy have been slowed by the co-development or absence of state institutions to support democracy and ensure transparency, accountability, norms, and the rule of law. Finally, an economic transition from oligarchy and monopoly to inclusive social and economic models has not yet taken hold to create economic conditions that benefit all people in the region. Now, let's make sure we understand the phenomenon of migration from the region. First, the graph on the left, which does not separate by nationality, shows that peaks and valleys in arrivals at the southern border of the US are nothing new. We see increases in the mid-1980s during economic austerity measures in Mexico, wars in Guatemala and El Salvador, and unaddressed autocracy, inequality, and poverty in Honduras. We also see spikes again after the peace treaties in the 1990s, and a substantial drop after about 2008 as the global recession started to take hold. In 2019, as we can see in the detail on the right, apprehensions of Central Americans at the US border jump as the first caravans arrive, which reduces cost and risk. I suspect this would have continued in 2020 had it not been for the pandemic. I think the high level we are seeing now, as shown by the upward trend in 2021 to date, is a continuation of what started in 2019, plus pent-up demand and increased hardship due to the pandemic and recent severe weather in Central America. It is also worth noting again the change in migration patterns in the Americas over the past few months and years. Migration from Mexico to the United States has recently doubled, and apprehensions at the US border of those from countries other than Mexico and Central America is nearly 250,000 in the year to date, which is more than double the level from 2019, which was a year that was already had a substantially higher number of migrants. The point here is that even though we are seeing high levels from Central America and the border remains in the news, migration from Central America and other parts of the Western Hemisphere is cyclical, and there's a mix of nationalities represented, with an upward trend in apprehensions this year that may continue given the shock of the pandemic and its economic fallout in Central America and beyond. Now, let's focus on why Central Americans say they intend to migrate. Here, we're using results from the Pulte Institute's most recent research in Honduras, where we can see that economic reasons for having migration intentions are by far the most reported, with violence, environmental issues, and political issues each also contributing to nearly half of the decisions to migrate. This is pretty typical to hear many Central Americans report economic reasons for having migration intentions. Though the degree to which economic reasons influence migration intentions varies somewhat from country to country and over time. What is also important to note is the high level of violence, the effects of climate change, such as longer droughts and stronger hurricanes, and potential and political instability that play a large role as well. This shows us that we cannot oversimplify to say that migration is just an economic, jobs, or violence issue. We see this even more clearly when we look at the youth alone in the next slide. Here, we asked young Hondurans who said they intended to migrate why they intended to do so. We did this at the beginning of a program and then 6 months after they completed the program. Again, having a job or better economic conditions, along with finding a safer place to live, are the most reported. However, we can see where reasons for wanting to migrate change among the same population within a year's time. We see increases among those wanting to live in a safer place and not to just have a job, but a job that pays better, while the importance of reuniting with family members decreases. This shows how it's not just one issue, but multiple interrelated issues that matter, and that these reasons can change in a relatively short period of time. This means that to improve realities, we can't just have a jobs program alone or a violence prevention program alone, because even if the situation improves in one area, there are a mix of issues at play that drive migration. So how do we respond to this desire to migrate? We do it in 4 main ways. First, we do it through legal pathways, where we provide temporary work for Central Americans in sectors of need. While these legal pathways have increased over the past few months, they are still only available for a few thousand Central Americans each year. Second, we respond through humanitarian channels by providing temporary protected status after natural disasters and limited asylum and refugee status to those that qualify. The burden of proof is high in these cases, and humanitarian visas are very limited. Third, we respond through border enforcement and deportation of those found without documents in the country. Finally, we respond over time with development assistance that addresses the economic, social, and political drivers of migration. This work is done in collaboration with civil society, NGOs, and firms in the United States and Central America. During the course of this series, we will focus on the development response pathway to address the challenging realities in the region. In our final session, we will also touch on the legal and humanitarian pathways, as there have been some important changes in those recently. One of the important reasons to focus on development beyond the border, apart from the obvious humanitarian concern for the well-being of Central Americans, is the potential return on investment. As we can see, the largest cost by far in responding to migration is enforcement. If we can reduce border arrivals, we can greatly reduce enforcement costs. It is maybe inconvenient, but a long view toward regional development is required. In the meantime, we need policies and the other response pathways that recognize that this is a cyclical issue and will repeat again over the next few decades. Finally, it is also important to understand that total development assistance for the region is less than 2% of the total foreign requests for the Department of State and U.S. Agency for International Development for the next fiscal year. And total foreign aid is less than 1% of the anticipated federal budget. So, in terms of development assistance to the region, we are talking about less than 0.1% of the U.S. federal budget as an investment in the region that could substantially improve lives and decrease other expenses for enforcement by billions in the coming years. Thank you for taking the time to brush up on the realities of migration from Central America ahead of the Beyond the Border series. I look forward to our discussion and invite you to register at think.nd.edu if you have not already done so.